my name is Gediminas Tarasevičius. I am a game designer at Current, but I don't see anything here. You cannot do it? Okay, never mind. That's okay. But is this working? Oh, I didn't press it enough. Okay, so first I would like to introduce you to our company. So we are Current, game developer and publisher, with 200 employees in 3 offices in Vilnius, Warsaw, and Odessa. And our flagship titles, as you see from the slide, it's addictive time management game Cooking Fever, which is like going strong for 4 years at an Apple Store. Then we have some kind of mid-core game, the Ultimate Sniper Experience in the form of Sniper Arena. It's a highly competitive PvP game for mobile devices. And just recently we also released the Hidden Object game. It's more like narrative-driven game with hidden object gameplay and like a lot of story, a lot of interesting story twists, a lot of puzzles, and you can get this game for free whenever you like on the device you have. With this thing done, we can move to being a game designer at Current and being a game designer in general. So as we develop and publish games for mobile devices, so we do products for mobile players. Being a game designer in this situation, and as from my experience of being a gamer for a long time, so being a game designer, it's like taming some ultra rare beast or fighting a really impressive raid boss in your favorite MMO. So on one hand, it's really exciting because as a game designer, you see how your ideas and your visions become games which are played by a million people around the world. But on the other hand, it's a really a challenging experience, and especially challenging in free-to-play mobile games market, because the trends are always changing. So yesterday it was loot boxes, today is battle royale, tomorrow we don't know what will happen. The players are changing, the audiences are changing, and also the costs for development of those games, for user acquisition for those games, it's always rising year after year. So it creates an environment where the risks are really high, and the most valuable resource is time, and the most expensive currency is players' attention. So with this in mind, so I skipped the slide, but as a game designer, you not only have to balance the game itself, but also to find like a middle point between 3 interests. So there is like business expectations, so there are players' aspirations, and there are your motivation as a game designer. And as a game designer, you always need to strive for self-realization and improvement. And being a successful game designer, like being a successful person in every other sphere of life, so basically you need 2 main ingredients. You need to have drive for it, and also with that drive you have to feel progress, because if you are not progressing in what you are doing in your life, you are like stalling in your position, and then you become unhappy. So with that being in mind, I would like to use this old meme, but the plus of it is that everybody knows it, and I would like to present you the idea of lean game design process. The idea in itself consists of 2 main ingredients. It's design thinking and lean method. Design thinking is a way of solving the problems. So it could be applied to any activity that involves design. And what you do with design thinking is solving really big problems which you cannot solve with simple methods. So you don't know how to solve this problem, and you use design thinking to solve that problem. And in design thinking, you basically you ideate, you implement something. So you come up with the idea, you implement that, and then test it. And from these results, then you go further. You come up with new ideas, and so the process it's like a loop. It repeats itself and it expands. And for this, you have to use lean method. So the designer will not overthink, over-design things and think too much about it. And lean design is basically about limiting waste in everything you do. Thus, the lean game design is the process of making game design decisions that maximize player engagement. So if you remember those three business needs, players' needs, and designers' needs, so maximize player engagement, improve lifetime, so engagement is good for the player, improve lifetime value is good for the business, and minimize development waste. It's also about business, but okay. So I define lean game design with 5 principles, which you can use when designing your game. These principles can be applied at any stage of game design or game development. They are backwards compatible, so even if you have some stage of your game, you can check those principles and try to question, because each principle comes with questions. You can kind of test your game, how this game works with those principles, and then you can use some techniques to change your design. And this is like, I don't know if you know, but there is no such like a rule set or some cheat list which you can use to create games and to create successful games. And if you like read the postmortems of game developers and about the stories of development of big AAA games, you always see the same pattern, that even though like people have successful game trilogies, successful games in the past, when they start making a new game, they're always struggling, because during that time everything changed and the player changed and players' hopes and expectations changed, and you have each game, it's like a new beginning for you. But the plus side is like the most important resource in game design and game development process is knowledge you get. And knowledge basically is a fluid thing that you always have to update, adding new information and new tested practices, so you could kind of build your mindset. And so techniques I will present later will help you with that. So lean game design, it's player-centric. In my past career, I worked in user experience and user interface and product design field, and this is like now it's like the hottest topic or the hottest idea in everything that ties to designing products or services. So with games, we have the player at the center of everything we make decisions about. And so what are players' expectations? What are players' emotions? What is our player? What audience we are trying to talk to with our game? Principle number 2 is only meaningful game systems. And by meaningful, I mean they have to bring value either to the player or to the business or to the other systems used in the game. So if the game system you have in your game does nothing, but you think that it's cool, it should not be in your design. Lean game design is KPI oriented. As I checked the audience, maybe some of you don't know, KPI is key performance indicator. And basically that's the goal with your game. In free-to-play mobile game world, you set your KPIs as some variables. So either you shoot for some kind of retention, some level of revenue, some level of lifetime value. But if you do some indie game or something which is not business driven, you can shoot for, I don't know, my KPI is 1,000 videos on YouTube of people playing my game, or my goal is, I don't know, 10,000 people playing my game. And this is like a backbone of your game design decision. So, lean game design is data-driven. Data-driven means that all your ideas which you put in your game design, you need to check with real players and gather as much data as you can and make analysis of that data and make new decisions based on that data. And you build initially, every game you build with that thought in mind, how you will collect data, what data you will collect, and how you work with that data. Lean game design is future-proof. With games in recent years transforming from single products where you just create the game, release it, and then move to the next game, now AAA studios, mobile game studios are shooting for games as a service model. So basically it's the game you create, and this game lives for 10 years, and all the time you add new content, you add new features, you add anything you want to keep that player with your game. Because in mobile, for example, in mobile sector, a big chunk of the players, they mostly have, they have one game, like most of the players have one game, and they play that game only. And that especially applies with the games we are making for casual audience. So they don't sit there on Google Play Store and browse the games and download for 5 new games each week. They have one game, Candy Crush Saga, whatever, Angry Birds, and Angry Birds maybe not so much, but they play it and that's it. And they wait for new content and they don't look at the other games. So, lean game design, those principles, they can be implemented in different ways. And for that, I will kind of selected some techniques which you can use, or each technique comes with a set of the questions which you use to kind of use that technique. So, research and empathize, being ruthless to your preconceptions, design as a player, play as a designer, lean documentation, everyone on the same page, knowing answers to all whys, be prepared for the worst, and go for it when the risks are low. This is not like a finite. You can by developing the game, you can come up with some new technique which you found effective in the process, and you can use that later on your next project. So, research and empathize. So with each technique, at the lower part of the screen, you will see to which principles it applies. So research and empathize, it's the in professional game development, and by professional, and I think indies also must do it, they must identify the audience they're making their game. So what is my player, what emotions the player feels, what provides the player the most fun, and where the player struggles. This research and empathize can be done in a different ways. So if you have the resources, if you work for the company, and you have the practice of doing playtest, of doing service, of doing market analysis, you can do that. If you are indie developer making a mobile game, you always have free sources of data. So if you're making, for example, action game with real-time shooting or something like that, you can go to services like App Annie, like Sensor Tower, and check the top, I don't know, 200, top 300 games in that category, and go one by one checking what numbers are of those games, so how many players they have, how many installs they have, what approximate revenue they get, and also you have the access to reviews of those games, so you can read the reviews one by the players. So you play that game, you read the reviews. You play the game as a game designer, you look at how this game is designed, and then you read the reviews of the players. So you get the feedback from the players, what they like and what they don't like in this game. And then you can, from this information, you can come up with new knowledge, and you can apply it to your game. Being ruthless to your preconceptions. It's kind of philosophical thing, but it's really important, and it's being ruthless not to your knowledge, but to your preconceptions. So the things you see for granted. So you think that there should be 3 guns in your game, and you think that it should be like this because I like 3 guns in my game, like shotgun or pistol or something like that. But being that, it kind of leaves you vulnerable when your preconceptions are outdated. So always with preconceptions you have to question why I am sure about this decision. Can I do it differently? And how can I do it differently? So always question yourself, and don't look from one angle. You always have to look from different angles. And being a successful game designer, and by successful I don't mean that a designer of successful financially games, but as successful as a professional. And that knowledge also, as I said, applies to different. So you can use that experience in other spheres of life. So you always have to think how you think, and always analyze yourself and analyze how you make decisions, and look for weak points in your decisions and how you can change this situation with this weak point. Design as a player as a designer, it's self-explanatory, but mostly designers we always have this dream. Like most of the designers have this dream about the game they would like to make, which kind of fits their taste and their expectations for a good game. But you also need to analyze why you like this game, and what emotions this game makes you feel that you like this game. And then you have to analyze this emotion, what stands behind it, and then use that knowledge to try to evoke the same emotion in the players of your game. Yeah, so how it will evoke the emotions in your players, because the players, they are emotional creatures, and in free-to-play world, in the world of free-to-play games, emotions that are the main things that make business part of it tick. Technique number 4, or goal number 4, it's lean documentation. You can approach this in 2 ways. You either go with the minimum required documentation for the core loop of your game. So you have the idea of the game, how the game will work, how the player, what actions he perform in what sequence, and how this go in cycles, and the player spends a lot of time on your game. So you can go with the minimal documentation for the first iteration of your game. It can be prototype, it can be something more than the prototype, but you always have to think about the resources at hand if you will be able to upkeep with the documentation you are making. So you can write a lot of design documents for each your system, write every piece of bit of information, and then you come up with a lot of text and a lot of maybe formulas and spreadsheets. But when your game is, for example, soft launch or is launched, and you get the first data from the players, and you see that you need to change your game, so you have the job at hand to change the game, so the players would play it more. But at the same time, what you do with your documentation, you do that second part of the job when you update the game, you make the changes, and then you update the documentation, so both of those will be on the same level. And with our experience, that it's really tough job to do, because nobody has time to change some document which basically nobody uses. But you can make use, you can find those extra resources and make your documentation up to date, and you can use that for another goal. So, for example, you have everything in your game design, in your game, all the systems described, how things work, what numbers are. Maybe after the launch of the game, you can put that design document in some wiki form or something like that, and post it online for the players to read, for the players to see how is your game built, for the gamers to look at to find some kind of strategies in your game, to find some solutions how they approach your game from that inner look, not from the outside. And if you will not create a wiki for your successful game, somebody else will do, and you will not have any control on it. So better you do it yourself. Technique number 5, it's not much about game design, but it's more about the communication. You as a game designer, most of the time will work with the team. And the goal for you is not only to create a good game design, but also to properly communicate that to your team. So they will understand your motivations in design decisions you made. And when they are on the same page, you can talk as a people, as colleagues who know how you think, and then maybe you can share that thinking, and then they will feel that they are part of it, and then they can put an extra effort to when implementing your ideas. So, is there enough communication? What is quality of communication? And is there a need of improvement of communication quality? Because without the communication, it will take much longer to develop the game, because a lot of, 30% of time people will do things they do not understand, and then you will have correct them at every step. So they don't know how you think, they just react to what you're telling them to do. But if they understand, they can make some decisions by themselves. Is that clear? No? Technique number 6 is knowing answers to all whys. So you as a game designer, you have your game, and random person who played your game comes to you and asks a question which starts with question why. You have to have the answer to any question of that sort. And it applies to the mechanics of the game, it applies to content of the game, it applies on the features of the game. If you cannot answer that question, so you have two options. You either find that answer, so you analyze what you did and try to come up with the motivation behind what you did, or you drop that piece of content or feature or mechanic from your game. Being prepared for the worst. So this is like the only one book recommendation I will give to you. You don't have to read it, but it's an interesting book. It's about the impact of the improbable. And it's by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He is past trader, now the book writer. And the essence of this book could be put in one question, in one statement. So the future is unpredictable. We cannot predict it, so we must prepare for the worst outcome of that future. So with game design, when you make some game design decisions and they are being implemented in the game, you always have to think that, okay, we haven't tested that with our players, but if we put if the players will play the game and they will not understand this thing, or if so in free-to-play games, if the player comes with that point where he doesn't like this, he just uninstalls your game and that player is lost. So in those scenarios, you always have to be prepared for the worst, not that, okay, I know this could happen, so what should I do? It doesn't mean that you have to have your CV freshed out, or you have to have like 3 recruiters online. You have to think of the ways how you react to possible failures of your game. and what actions you will take if those failures will occur. And this is the last technique about breaking the rules when the risk is low. Sometimes designers put too much emphasis on some things in their games, defining them as really critical, or your team may think that this is really critical. But you being a game designer and understanding, so you use those techniques and you know your game from this point to this point, you must, in the situations where there is a question about something and the risk of making some changes, of making a decision are not really clear, in the case if that risk is low, so if it's all about, I don't know, some button position in your UI, or is it like in some part of your level where is like you came up with some level design and then you don't think what will happen, maybe at that moment you think that maybe I have to move this part here, so it kind of small risk, so you can do that. But if the risk is really big and it can, for example, break your business model, then you have to come up with an environment where you can make those big risks in control environment. So in game development, you can do that with, out of all your audience, if you have that audience, you select a part of the people and risk on them. Of course, you risk losing them, but then you can test if these decisions can be successful. So all the early accesses, on the betas, or all the partial feature rollouts is basically taking big risks on a smaller scale. And if that succeeds, then you can do the same for all the players, for all your audiences. And so, at the end, I cannot guarantee 100%, but some things really check with you. You will have the better game for yourself and for the player. You will gain lots of new knowledge. You will have a better motivated team. Your development scope will be better defined, and you will have agility in decision making and in development. And that will lead to the waste control. So there will be less work which was done for the purpose of work. So thank you.